All right, guys. On my wedding ring actually is Hebrew on the outside of it. What it says is, "I am my beloved, and my beloved is mine." That's what it says in Hebrew on the outside of my wedding ring. And on the inside is Ephesians chapter 5 inscribed, just the chapter and the verse in the book on the inside of my wedding ring. All right? And Mallory actually has the inverse, "I am my beloved, and he is mine," on her wedding ring. And then it says the same thing, Ephesians 5. And ironically, we're going to connect those two ideas of Ephesians and the Song of Solomon. Now, when I asked Mallory to marry me, I went a little bit over the top, just a smidge, okay? She was working at a particular kind of firm, like an advertising firm at the time. I would say she wasn't just like customer service. She was actually dealing with clients. She was kind of mid-level at that time. And I knew her boss well and went to the same church as her boss. So we conspired to deceive her greatly. What a great way to kick off a relationship. Deception, okay? And so we convinced her that she was going to be a part of this special convention that was going to happen in Chicago, and that she was nominated from the company to go represent them in Chicago. And she bought this hook, line, and sinker. Okay? Fantastic. So leading up to it, she's super pumped. She's going to go to Chicago. She's living her best life. I strategically, and it was leading up to her birthday, by the way, did not call her. You know, I wanted the juxtaposition of being angry with me. I know, terrible. So she doesn't hear from me. She gets on an airplane. She gets to Chicago. She lands. There's a limo waiting for her. Still hasn't done the math, right? This must be one incredible conference. Well, she gets in the limo, and who's in the limo? This guy right here. Now, here's what's real. I knew my hair was falling out. I had to strike quick, all right? I knew I was fading fast. I had to move, and I had to go big. So we're in Chicago. She realizes the whole thing's a ruse. We're walking along the Navy Pier. We got the Chicago skyline in the background. It's gorgeous. I asked some random person, "Will you take our picture?" She takes our picture. I say, "Hey, Mal, hang on. Let me make sure how it looks." I went up to this person, and I said, "I'm about to ask her to marry me. Just keep taking pictures," right? And so we have on Facebook me dropping down and her in shock and awe, right? And now this is over the top. Had I had any idea how messy love can be, I don't regret it. But you want to talk about setting the bar really high from the beginning? That can work against you when it plays out over years, right? Like, where's that guy, okay? And that's just it. See, love is messy. Relationships are messy. And that's really what's interesting about Song of Solomon. The way it's laid out, it's messy. And I'm going to do the best that I can to highlight some parts of these two people that are in constant pursuit of one another. Song of Solomon, which is what we're going to look at today, actually, like in Jewish tradition, like you had to be of age to even read it, because there's certain parts of it that are, quite adult, frankly. And so everyone always struggled with how to interpret it, because there is one view where you would have said, okay, well, it's God and his children, and it's a love relationship, and you can see that that's pretty solid. And then years later, it's Jesus the groom, and the bride is the church, and there's a beautiful connection there. And that, you could say that comes through in Song of Solomon, it absolutely does. But then there's also just man and woman. And that's where, if you start reading it from that angle, it gets over the top. So there's some parts we're strategically going to skip over, okay? But it definitely touches on just this pursuit of a relationship, and it doesn't even have a clean ending. Just like love, see? Just kind of goes on and on and on and on. That's how it works. And there's some beautiful themes. We believe, of course, Song of Solomon is that Solomon wrote it. If Solomon didn't write it, perhaps a contemporary of Solomon. Here's what you need to know about Solomon when it comes to his reputation. 1 Kings 4:29-34. And God gave Solomon wisdom and understanding beyond measure, and breadth of mind like the sand on the seashore, so that Solomon's wisdom surpassed the wisdom of all the people of the East and all the wisdom of Egypt. for he was wiser than all other men, wiser than Ethan the Ezrahite, and Heman, Calcol, and Darda, the sons of Mahol, and his fame was in all the surrounding nations. He also spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs were 1,005. He spoke of trees, from the cedar that is in Lebanon to the hyssop that grows out of the wall. He spoke also of beasts and of birds and of reptiles and of fish. And people of all nations came to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and from the kings of the earth who had heard of his wisdom. Elon Musk mentioned this no more than a few weeks ago. The phone in your hand has access to more information than the wisest of kings would have had 2,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago. And so when there was somebody that would have had the corner market on wisdom or something profoundly interesting to say, that's a draw. Think about how much your world would have been walled off to just what was in front of your nose. So people would come from all around to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and whether it was literally him that wrote it or contemporary, it's very much in the vein of who he is, okay? And Song of Songs means like the greatest of songs. It doesn't get any better than this. Here it is, okay? So it starts out with this bride. She confesses her love. He's a shepherd. Here's what she says. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is better than wine. Your anointing oils are fragrant. Your name is oil poured out. Therefore virgins love you. Draw me after you. Let us run. The king has brought me into his chambers. Ladies, have you ever said that to your man? For your love is better than wine. Now here, think about this. What's the most expensive wine? Usually. You walk into a store of any kind, it's not the stuff dated 2024. It's not the stuff that's a year old. So it gets better with age. It becomes more precious with age and with time. She's already touching on that theme when she speaks of him. It's not just it's better than wine, it's going to get better over time. The depth of it. Sure, the complexity of it, but also the meaning behind it, right? And this is what the others say, kind of this third-party chorus. We will exult and rejoice in you. We will extol your love more than wine. Rightly do they love you. And then she goes on to say, I am very dark but lovely, O daughters of Jerusalem, like the tents of Kedar, like the curtains of Solomon. Do not gaze at me because I am dark, because the sun has looked upon me. My mother's sons were angry with me. They made me keeper of the vineyards, but my own vineyard I have not kept. Tell me, you whom my soul loves, you where you pasture your flock, where you make it lie down at noon. For why should I be like the one who veils herself beside the flocks of the companions? So what's going on there? She's a beautiful woman. She's a hard-working woman. She's virtuous. She's pure. She's the best of what's around. And there are other women who have envy towards these qualities that are within her. Traits within the human condition that we've long since extinguished, right? So there's envy from all sides for her. She works hard, but she also has envy within her own family. And what's that about? Well, what it's about is what she has done and the toil that she's put in, she gives to him. A man will leave his mother and his father, right? And the two will become one. Her priorities is this person in her life, above and beyond family. You know, I feel like when I do a wedding so often, and the couple comes up here, I always try to mention that, just for a moment, you know? And then see, does the mom and dad squirm a little bit? Because sometimes people don't want to completely embrace the fact that this couple, when they come up here, they are their new, different entity with Jesus. Yes, they have their families, but it is such a hard thing sometimes for everyone to embrace that this is now their priority, is one another. And if you're out there, and especially if you're from a herd family, okay, the herd family, you'll know if you're from a herd family, because you just move in a herd. This is where we're going to go for Easter. This is where we're going to go for Thanksgiving. What are we going to do? Give us the order. You know, that's a herd family, okay? It's super hard to recognize what's best for our little family. That's not an easy thing to do. And her family's not a fan of that. Her brothers don't care for what she's doing. But see, she's virtuous. She's clear. She knows what's true. And there's that dynamic, right? So then it goes on to say, she says this. She's talking about him. Check it out. Check it out, fellas. His arms are rods of gold. That's a good one to throw out later, right? Set with topaz. His body is like polished ivory, decorated with lapis lazuli. His legs are pillars of marble, set on bases of pure gold. His appearance is like Lebanon, choice as its cedars. His mouth is sweetness itself. He is altogether lovely. This is my beloved. This is my friend, daughters of Jerusalem. So she's talking about his physical appearance. But what's that one little word she throws in? Yeah, he's my beloved, but he's also my friend. Partner in crime. We're in the mess together. We're a team. This is not just the man with legs of marble that I look upon, right? But he's also my friend. It goes way deeper than his arms of gold. This is my friend, see? And then there's this whole thing that starts happening of seeking and finding and desiring. It's almost like she kind of runs off and then he chases, right? And then it looks like things are about to be to the point where, you know, it's like this is about to jump up a rating or two. And then it stops and it almost restarts. And then she's running and running again, and then he's chasing after her. And there's sort of these intimate little moments that happen, and then it kind of restarts throughout this whole book. It's like this constant theme of pursuing, fleeing and pursuing. But it's not like she's actually trying to get away. It's painting the imagery of how this is supposed to work. Men pursue. Men are meant to pursue their beauty. That's super easy when you're dating, isn't it? It's easy to fly her to Chicago when you got to convince her before all your hair falls out, I need you to marry me. You know, that's easy. Gets kind of hard after 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 25 years, 40 years, pursuing. Here's what he has to say, 6:4-7. He says, you're beautiful as Tisra, my love, lovely as Jerusalem, awesome as an army with banners. Turn away your eyes from me, for they overwhelm me. Your hair is like a flock of goats. I'm not going to use that one, ever. Leaping down the slopes of Gilead, your teeth are like a flock of ewes that have come up from the washing. All of them bear twins. Look, they match. See? That's it. You got all your teeth, and they're white, right? All of them bear twins. Not one among them has lost its young. Your cheeks are like halves of pomegranate behind your veil. So he's pointing out her beauty. He's pointing out all the things that make her beautiful. And if you get deeper into this, it's not just what's on the outside. You know, I will just say this to dads real quick, because I have to be mindful of this as well, you know. It's one thing to tell your daughters, like, they're beautiful. You know, I think about all the things that are awaiting my daughters, and I try to tell them they're beautiful as often as I can, because when I look at the other people that are going to say that to them, this is the only way I know how to get ahead of the curve, right? My hope and my prayer is that the first time some testosterone-crazed 17-year-old named Spike looks at one of my daughters and says, girl, you're so beautiful, that she would have been like, I know, my dad said that for 16 years, okay? What else you got? That's what I'm hoping will happen, okay? But here's what's critical, especially to our daughters. They need to hear that they're also beautiful in here. the uniqueness that they're wired, the unique gifts that they've been given. It's an inside and outside thing. They have a lot that's flying at them already from a vanity standpoint, a lot of pressures, and you're all aware of this. So we have to make that known. And then Ecclesiastes and Song of Solomon does something interesting. There's a pivot, and it just talks about the power of love. Here's what she says. Set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm, for love is strong as death. Jealousy is fierce as the grave. Its flashes are flashes of fire, the very flame of the Lord. Many waters cannot quench love, neither can floods drown it. If a man offered for love all the wealth of his house, he would be utterly despised. What is he talking about? He's talking about a couple things. Number one, the power of knowing and fully being known. When there's no secrets, when there's true intimacy, when you know and accept the person for all of their weird quirks, the way that they grind their jaw when they're sleeping, the way that they never put their toothbrush up when you ask them to, all of the little weird things that you know about the person, and that you love them even in the midst of all those things. It's a deeper intimacy of knowing the way that they're wired, knowing the things that trigger or bother them, knowing the things in their past that they're insecure about, all of that stuff, right? All of it. But then she goes on to say the power of love. It's like a fire, right? I mean, love, think about it. Think of it just in terms of a fire. It's a flame that can keep you warm. It's also a flame that can burn down your house. That's what she's saying, right? The great American philosopher, Al Green, would put it this way. It can make you do wrong. It can make you do right. You can go home early for love, and you'll stay out all night long. Love and happiness, right? The power of it. But it is a flame, and she's not wrong. That dynamic, she's highlighting. And then there's this bizarre moment, and I will tell you that denominationally things split up big time right here in this one little section. Because you could look at this two different ways, and I'll just share kind of both aspects of it. Here it is, verse 10. I was a wall, and my breasts were like towers. Then I was in his eyes as one who finds peace. Solomon had a vineyard at Baal Hamon. He let out the vineyard to keepers. Each one was to bring for its fruit 1,000 pieces of silver. My vineyard, my very own, is before me. You, O Solomon, may have the 1,000, and the keepers of the fruit 200. So one view, and this would be probably in a lot of the books that I have, frankly, would be that this is the imagery of them sharing all of their assets and their wealth. No secrets, even on the financial side. There's no his or hers kind of thing. And if there's any separation, it's fully known. So she's even outlining, this isn't just a physical thing. It's not just an emotional thing. It's when the rubber hits the road, all aspects of our life, even down to our vineyards. He's got this many, I know this, we're doing this, okay? So if you want to go that way, that's a beautiful message to have, right? The other one is kind of this other take of like now making Solomon like he's from the outside looking in, and he tries to do what the Beatles clearly said you can't do. Buying love. You can't buy me love. And it's as though what he's trying to do in that moment is buy the she and offer her enough to come into a relationship with him. Two different angles. And she's not selling. So no matter how you want to look at it, when it comes to the financial side of it, what it's just pointing out is a certain level of integrity within this relationship. You can read it either way, but the point is that stays the same. Even when the cash is flying, it doesn't make a difference to who she is and her character. She's rock solid, see? So she doesn't compromise. There's no compromise in her. And I think this is a thing that if you want to do the rubber hits the road kind of right now in culture, We really need to be aware of a few things that are happening, okay? Western civilization is under attack. It just is. And I know how culture would spin that. Christian values, what it means to be a follower of Jesus, what this looks like in relationships. It's being hit on every single side right now. Every angle you can imagine. And it's happening not just here, but on a whole other continent across the ocean. It's happening everywhere right now. And what I've noticed, and Mallory and I have talked about this more often, is how women that are our age and younger, the poison that they're fed already as little girls. And some of that poison, I think we have to address it, okay? And it's from the feminist viewpoint, okay? And what we keep telling young ladies is you don't need a man. Now, I will totally co-sign. You don't need a boy who shaves. I'm with you. It is actually better to be alone and single than to be married and alone. Okay? 100%. So if that's where life leads you, it is better than to just hold on to what God has given you and the doors He's opened and the doors that He's shut than to be married at all costs. I wouldn't argue that. But that's not what they're being fed. And they're being fed, own your sexuality. And what they don't realize is it's actually to their own detriment. This is the irony of the whole situation. And so I represent the first generation now of women, more now than ever, that are hitting in their 30s, their late 20s, their 30s, and now even 40s going, I believed this whole thing. And no one told me it's just a cliff. Now I'd kind of like a family. Now I'd kind of like something more in a relationship. And now I'm struggling to realize I was lied to during my teen years and my 20s. So this is the dynamics now even our children are being hit with. Your daughters are being hit with. Young ladies are having to face in culture and society. And it's lies meant to destroy the future of their lives. It's often said, and this is this dynamic that we keep denying it. And on social media, it's fascinating to watch this level of denial. But what it's often said is that men have fewer options at the beginning and have more options at the end. Women have more options at the beginning and less options at the end. Now, I don't know why it's that way. It's just that way. And if you can convince one whole group gender-wise that just you don't need it, don't worry about it, and then you can convince a whole other group of men to just act like godless animals, then you've destroyed any chance of godly homes and families. So this is what's at stake. And she is positioning in every one of these chapters against that. She's a woman of God, a woman of integrity. She loves her man, but she's not going to compromise who she is. She's both strength and power and virtue, and at the same time, she has a side to her that is soft and loving and tender. See? And this is now what's beginning to happen where you see the two of them run off. Again, it has no ending. It's beautiful. Here's what it says. In verse 13, O you who dwell in the gardens with companions listening for your voice, let me hear it. Verse 14, make haste, my beloved, and be like a gazelle or a young stag on the mountains of spices. What basically is happening is they just run off again. He's chasing her. It's the same thing when we were all kids. I don't know if you remember this, like at recess time, the girls, at least when I was in school, would be like, okay, we're going to play tag and we're going to run. The girls ran. What did the guys do? You ran after them. Now, like a dog that catches a squirrel, you never knew what to do once you caught up with them. I don't know. But that's the dynamic. See? And they go off. And it just kind of continues into oblivion. That's what happens. It's fleeing and pursuing. And what an underlining theme is that they keep it playful. There's no secrets. There's nothing being hidden. And if I could tell you anything in this room that I think would be helpful as a pastor now who's walking with people's marriages and their relationships. Number one, keep it fun. What do I mean? You got to keep that pursuit happening. There's a playfulness to what's happening here. Don't lose that aspect in your marriage. And I get it, as you get older, it gets tougher, right? Keep it awkward. What do I mean? No secrets. No secrets. What's the passcode? What's the password? What's the app? No secrets. Secrets kill. Schedule life, schedule dates. Maybe you have to carve out the time now. It's not as easy as it used to be. But this dynamic can't die. It has to stay in that marriage, in that relationship. And this is what's at stake. Ephesians 5, chapter 21. It's so interesting. Whenever I let men and women, before I do a wedding, I will have them look through Ephesians 5. And I hand the man a highlighter and I hand the woman a highlighter. And I tell them, highlight the things that you don't like from this chapter. I won't be offended. And they all highlight the exact same things. Because if you're familiar with chapter 5, it's about women submitting, and it's about men being willing to sacrifice for women. And they will inevitably highlight the exact same portions of Scripture. It's fascinating. So what's at stake is we now see that after the fall, there's a dynamic in this room between men and women. And we've battled with it for 5,000 years, ever since the fall. Before the fall, men and women, we complemented each other. We had different roles, but we were all good with that. In theory, had this all worked out, you'd have a different role, but you're complementing each other. Well, once the fall happened, from that day forward, we no longer complemented each other. We now competed with each other. And this is why in Genesis he says, hey, guess what? Guys, everything is going to war against you in this life. You're going to go mow your lawn and you're going to be out of gasoline. You're going to go get gasoline, you're going to start the mower, and you're going to run over a sprinkler head 5 minutes in. Then he says, hey, ladies, check it out. Here's what's going to happen. Every time you try to bring a child into this world, it's going to hurt so bad, you're going to wonder if you should ever do this again. And this is going to be your life. And then he goes on to say in Genesis, he goes, because of the fall, ladies, you're the 2.0. You're made from the rib, refined stuff. You're going to look at him forever and go, I could do this better than him. What a lazy slug, right? I could be on the phone, I can be doing this, I can be cooking dinner and solve his problems all at once, right? And then he says, but check this out, because of the fall, men, you will rule over her. What does he mean? That whenever you've had enough, you'll no longer have diplomacy in your heart. It'll just be, I said it my way or the highway. How are we doing? So this is forever the dynamic. And he's saying now because of the fall, women don't want to submit and men don't want to commit. No committing, no submitting. What's at stake is that this book never happens and it never plays out in Scripture because men aren't willing to commit on the daily and women don't want to follow even a godly man. So this is the balance that lives in all of us. We all have it. We all struggle with this. And finally, what this text is talking about is its imagery of the garden. It's all garden imagery. And the beauty of the garden imagery is he's trying to pull you back to a place before human beings had shame and guilt, where they loved freely and they loved openly. He's trying to say, listen, in the recreation of all things, the new heaven and the new earth will be the Garden of Eden again. There'll be no more crying, no more tears, no more shame, no more fear, no more worries, no more insecurities. And people will be able to love and exist again like they never had before. And that's going to be made possible because of the pursuit of Jesus, the perfect groom. Because the groom will continue to chase his bride, just as this man chases his bride throughout Song of Solomon. And of course, different than this bride in Song of Solomon, she's not always that excited about being caught. Sometimes she's going to pretend she doesn't even know who he is. Sometimes she's going to chase after other lovers. Sometimes she's going to deny him. Sometimes she's going to keep him at arm's length. Sometimes she's going to be angry. Sometimes she's going to be vengeful. Sometimes she's going to hold a grudge and have hate in her heart. But that's the difference between the He that resides over heaven and the earth, who sits on a throne in which all leaders are nothing more than a stool where He rests His feet, because His pursuit never stops, even when He's rejected. His pursuit never ends, even unto death in the grave. That's the kind of He that we need in this room. And that's the kind of He we're freely given in Jesus Christ. That we can live in this struggle, and that God by His grace will allow our relationships and our marriages and our families to have these qualities. And when we fall horribly short and we fail miserably, that there is one who will continue to chase us and pick us back up by His grace and His mercy. Amen? Amen. Let's